Nalu FM Finance Podcast. Insight into the financial markets.
When a portfolio manager has to build a product, expecting them to be able to do everything we've just been talking about in their head and to get a better than 50th percentile output is a kind of ridiculous concept. I mean, it's just not possible.
This podcast is powered by Vesta, the engine behind active management. Vesta is a Switzerland-based fintech startup that provides software for issuers of actively managed certificates to automate their value chain fully. Visit Vesta, VESTR.com to schedule a meeting with an expert and to learn more about Vesta.
I'm here with Richard Waddington, who is the CEO of Sherpa Funds Technology here in Singapore. I would like to talk a little bit about what you guys do here. You say optimal risk sizing and portfolio management, I think is one of the subtitles. But can you maybe start with and explain in sort of a couple of sentences what Sherpa Funds Technology is and how it, what type, who do you help and how do you achieve it basically? Just as an intro.
Yeah. So as an intro, first up, hello everybody. As an intro, our raison d'être is really helping people with data-driven decision making, and that's quite a broad topic, and of course it's fairly well known in many other industries. But in investment management, particularly at the portfolio manager side rather than the asset selection side, data-driven decision making is quite rare. And so when we talk about data-driven decision making, I kind of deliberately use that phrase rather than optimization or anything sort of mathematical, because it's not about having some fancy tool or some clever maths, both of which we have. It's about helping a client with a process that helps them be better at what they're already quite good at. So data-driven decision-making, allowing them to take decisions around how to build risk-taking portfolios that makes the best use of their skills.
Okay, that's quite an interesting best use of their skills. That makes it quite. So, is there an example how you can maybe showcase this a little bit? It's just quite abstract right now.
Yeah, it's quite abstract. An allegory is the thing I always talk about, which is it's an investment portfolio, and we really talk about institutional investment portfolios, so pension funds. Let's take pension funds, mutual funds, this type of thing, rather than wealth product. When you talk to people who manage money, third-party money, a lot of them will talk about line item risk in their portfolio. And so you can say, hey, what's going on in your portfolio? And they go, oh, I've got, Apple or Credit Suisse or whatever, because this is what interests them. They are at heart analysts and they have years of experience of analyzing. So they are thinking, and this is my analogy, they are thinking of the portfolio as a salad, right? A plate on which lots of different things sit next to each other. And they talk about, over here, we've got the carrots, right? And over here, we've got, the beetroot. But when you invest, or any investor in a pooled asset investment product, you're actually buying a soup, not a salad. What you care about is how the thing has been put together. Because the experience you have as an investor is the experience of the whole thing at once. It doesn't actually matter what happens to the beetroot or the carrot or whatever. What matters is that the whole soup has been put together properly. So the process of converting them from the salad to the soup is a process of understanding not only how the ingredients were originally chosen and what they're meant to do, it's also what is the thing you've sold to your investor. So
what is their expectations?
What is their expectations? What did you say up front you were going to do?
Does it mean you then sort of look at the portfolio then in do you do a factor analysis on it in the sense of how do you define your exposure then, or your...
Yeah. At core, different end products have different attribute requirements, and an attribute might be factorness and that might be a classical Farmer-French factor, or it might be a Barra factor, or it might be some internal factor. I mean, we tend to talk more about portfolio attributes, which can be a factor or anything else.
Yeah.
And so, some clients will have very specific requirements to minimize or maximize or control particular portfolio attributes. But that's not the end goal. That's a constraint on the end goal. The end goal is the best expression of your view within those constraints. So you can say, I have a view that whatever, these stocks are going to do really well and these stocks are going to do really badly. Okay. And on top of that, I have a requirement that my growth factor should be less than something, and there must be this much small caps or whatever it happens to be. So there's a view, and then there's a requirement, a set of requirements, constraints. And when you want to create the final product, you need to express that view in the best way possible for the constraints that you have. And then you have a final weighing up thing, a balance you have to do between how much you want to express your view and how much you want to insulate against concentration risk.
So I suspect when you start with a client like this, there's quite a bit of a process because they first have to come to terms with actually they're going to have to define all these things, their constraints and attributes they're trying to optimize, which some of them are probably subconscious and you have to drag it out of them in a sense.
100%. We always say it. The engagement with Sherpa is very front-loaded in terms of effort at our end. Yeah. And the very first thing that we will do is shine a torch on the decision-making that is going on within the firm. And even that process, actually, managers find that incredibly helpful because we rarely say something they don't know, but there's always lots that they haven't actually formally written down.
Yes, I can imagine that one. So is there an iterative process over time, or I presume that constantly you review also to prove that what value you're adding in a sense? Is there...
Yeah, the simple prove we're adding value that's actually the easy part because we have, clients we've been working with for 3 or 4 years and we can show them the difference month-to-month returns of our recommendations versus what they were doing before our recommendation. So they will say, okay, this is my portfolio and my views, and this is how I would do it. And we're like, well, actually, you should tweak this and this and this.
Yeah.
And then over time, we keep all that data and we can show that. So that part's, the demonstration of value is easy. The demonstration of economic value is easy. The demonstration of process value is much more softer.
Yeah.
But that's clear in the discussions we have that the PMs are, yes, we want 1 hour a month with Sherpa where we're going to listen to Sherpa talk about our portfolio, which is it's a very different type of interaction to say a research provider, whereas a research provider talks about the research provider's own views.
Yes.
We talk about the client's views.
Yes.
Right. And so like, you say you've got these views, but actually the risk
what
of the
you're expressing is
portfolios-
a slightly different view.
Yeah.
Then okay.
Or it's not attuned properly.
Wow. Okay. And when you then also look back, obviously you can say, okay, we did 200 or 300 basis points better a year. Do you also look at measure how much did you add riskiness to the portfolio, or
everything in our view is about downside risk, and it's not volatility because we don't look at a kind of linear standard deviation. We look at a accelerating downside risk. So a sort of if you lose 2%, it might be -1 unit of risk. If you lose 4%, it's going to be -6 units of risk. If you lose 10%, it's -50 units of risk. So it heavily penalizes downside in all our analytics. And the point of what we try to do is what we actually achieve doing is creating expressions of risk, portfolios, which when the client's views are correct, they get the same return as they would have done with their portfolio. And when they're wrong, they lose much less.
Yeah.
That's the core. So by providing the same, if the client is prepared to take an amount of risk, we will tune
You
our...
assume what he already has, that is the risk he's willing to take.
So we say, this is the risk you're taking.
Yeah.
We will tune our solution to have the same upside risk as you. But because we are doing the maths in a slightly better way, blah, blah, the downside risk on our portfolio will be less. And then over time, you can see where on any given day when their portfolio makes, +3, ours makes +2.9 or +3.1. So it's around there. When their portfolio is down -2, ours is always down -1. So that you can imagine that scatter graph.
Yeah.
And over time, you build up that scatter graph and you say, look, guys, it's really clear. We're giving you as good or better expression of your view when you're right. And we're controlling your downside much better. And
from the clients that using this one, what is sort of the typical client? Are these funds, certain size? In what assets do they operate usually?
Yeah, so the majority of our client base are equity trading. We have a couple of macro. And we can talk about why that is one side versus the other. And of our equity guys, 80% are long-only benchmarked. So big pension funds, big mutual funds. And they're big because this is quite, it's quite an involved process. And you have to be able to, you have to have the resources, both financial and people-wise, to spend time with us.
Is there any myth in your industry that you would like to debunk?
I'm putting out there, I have to say this because, of course, it's my business, but when a portfolio manager has to build a product, now that's what a portfolio manager is, right? He or she is a product builder. Expecting them to be able to do everything we've just been talking about in their head and to get a better than 50th percentile output is a kind of ridiculous concept. I mean, it's just not possible. And so it's not really a myth. It's just something that really people don't really think about. Like you've got, if you're running a book of 60 assets, say, you've got a 60-dimensional problem with maybe 4 or 5 different constraints, including a benchmark and risk and sector and all that kind of stuff. And the idea that a PM can do this and get anywhere near a good result is just a fallacy. Now, experienced PMs, and all our clients are people who've been running money for 15, 20 years minimum. Experienced PMs solve this problem heuristically without a real process, but they sort of get there and they're never too far off the median result.
The good ones.
Yeah. Experienced ones. But I mean, because, well, they are experienced by dint of being good, because otherwise they wouldn't survive. They wouldn't be there. And the point is that a process, it can never get you to the very best result because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. But you can statistically go from the median, the 50th percentile, to the 65th or 70th percentile consistently by improving your process. So the myth is it's the only way to do it, and we don't really know how good or bad it is. The reality is we can tell you exactly how well or badly you're doing, and we can bump you up into, rather than being median, to being 60th, 70th percentile. Our experience shows is about 200 to 300 bips per unit leverage.
My last question I always like to ask everybody here, and that is, what are your up to 3, one is enough, but you can go up to 3, favorite finance movies and why?
Finance movies. Does Risky Business count?
Yes.
I'll go with Risky Business.
Excellent.
I guess, yeah, I prefer movies more about, entrepreneurship and a little bit less following the rules. But then, because movies about finance where they're not following the rules, they're basically criminals, right? Which,
yes, pretty much everything. If you tell from Wall Street to no, margin call is not criminals, but let's say The Big Short to
Gordon Gekko,
Boiler Room, arbitrage. Yeah.
I think things like, again, is it finance? Glengarry, Glen Ross, right?
That's ABC.
That's
always be closing.
Always
That is
be closing.
That is a classic one.
Yeah. I mean, just shows
your expertise.
Show your expertise.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan.
Nalu FM Finance Podcast. Insight into the financial markets.
This podcast is powered by Vesta, the engine behind active management. Vesta is a Switzerland-based fintech startup that provides software for issuers of actively managed certificates to automate their value chain fully. Visit Vesta, VESTR.com to schedule a meeting with an expert and to learn more about Vesta.